But they have, enough bodies that if you're telegraphing your plays and you're not running something creative, you'll find yourself in a 14-3 game midway through the third quarter pretty quickly.
Welcome back to the American Needs Fredericks podcast, where we cover Iowa sports.
And it's finally game week. We're finally at the season. We are Iowa versus Utah State, a game preview. We're not talking about personnel. We're not talking about recruiting. We're talking about an actual game, and it's the best.
Yeah.
And it feels like Christmas morning, that Saturday morning, the first week of college football.
It is. You can, without much pushback, you could crack a beer at 9 in the morning, sit down for college game day.
Yep.
Go through all of the picks, all the bets.
Yep.
Set your whole week at, it's perfectly normal to sit down from 11 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night on your couch.
Definitely.
And that's all the plans you need.
You get the random injury that someone's out. You get the weird depth chart tweak at the last moment.
Yeah.
You get to start thinking about your team critically. And then the games start, and you're watching a new product and a new team for the first time. And, I think it's actually a great, opportunity for Iowa to start out Utah State. That's being the first opponent. It's kind of like a faceless opponent. You don't really have anything you're really concerned about them for, but, you get to see the Iowa product in a new season against them.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a typical week one game.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a little bit of offensive insecurity. It could go two ways here for Kirk.
Right.
Is he going to want us to perform well in the first half, potentially open up the play calling where you see more deep shots, you see a little more creative design? Or is it going to be typical ho-hum Iowa where we come out and we run outside zone and boot pass for a whole half and see if we can take a 7-3 lead?
Right. So I'm going to do a quick breakdown of Utah State. These breakdowns week to week will be a lot longer than this generally.
Mm-hmm.
But for Utah State, they were a 6-7 team last year. They're picked to finish in the bottom third of the Mountain West this year. Expectations are low. They're pretty mediocre last year. They only returned 4 offensive starters, including 1 offensive lineman. That's usually a bad sign against Iowa. If they had a higher returning starters and maybe a good quarterback in the Mountain West, this game would be a little more concerning. And only returned 5 starters on defense. They're picked 113th in Bill Connolly's SP+. So a good year for them would be about 7-5.
Yeah.
And that's who we're playing this week.
I think it's 7 wins against some pretty mediocre teams as well.
Right.
The takeaway from when I watched, 3 or 4 games of theirs last year is the skill is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They have, Mountain West skill talent where you see running backs who can make moves, receivers who look the part.
Right.
QB that they're going to be playing, Lagasse has kind of a lollipop arm.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not afraid to take chances. Threw a lot of picks late in games.
Right.
We're going to probably see a couple picks from him. And then he has legs though. So we're going to see a lot of read option. Likely with Iowa being in game one, not very worried about their offensive scoring against this team. We're going to see probably a pretty relaxed Phil Parker defense.
Mm-hmm.
Going to make Utah State prove it before we make any plays.
Yeah.
And, you're going to want experience run your base stuff. So we're not going to probably see a whole lot.
Well, I think that's what you should. It's kind of like a week one under Kirk Ferentz. Like we want to run our base stuff. We want to be comfortable, running our outside zone. We want to be comfortable running basically our 14 plays we want to run all year on offense. We want to run those all in the first half or first 3 quarters. I'm not going to see a lot of wrinkles or, creative play actions.
Floods,
right.
boots.
Bubble screen.
Yeah.
Running back screen. Defense, you're not going to really see a lot of, rotating, especially in a game like this where you're rotating down to cover 3 or, trying to have some surprise blitzes out of nowhere for Parker. And it's interesting because against, other week one opponents, you'd think it had the same model this year as well. But now with the contract stipulation for Brian Ferentz, do you anticipate us to open up a little more?
Yeah. See, that's what I think that when you look at Kirk Ferentz, he's fairly rarely concerned with appeasing the fan base.
Right.
He'll do some things if it becomes apparently obvious, like, okay, I need to adjust in this manner. I need to go for on 4th down more often. I need to, stop getting fake punts ran against me.
Right.
Yes, those are the adjustments he understands. It's like a winning concept.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to like, do I want my team to score 42 points so the guys in the stands are happy?
Right.
I don't think that's going to change this Saturday.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a lot of what we've seen under Kirk is
Mm-hmm.
we want to come out and run our base stuff. And then if it works out well, it works out well. If it doesn't, maybe we'll throw a couple wrinkles in the second half.
Right. And it would not surprise me at all if this is kind of like a Mountain West non-conference type game. We played Colorado State in 2021 and Wyoming in 2017, and our offense did not move the ball particularly well in either of those games.
Yeah.
if you're not really running creative stuff against those type of defenses, and Mountain West actually
You're
has
telegraphing
some pretty high caliber athletes, in certain positions, not a full roster and the depth that they Power 5 have, but they have enough bodies that if you're telegraphing your plays and you're not running something creative, you'll find yourself in a 14-3 game, midway through the third quarter pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to, how are we going to behave in this game, with the offensive woes? Are we going to try to step up that play calling play sheet where it's not 14 plays, it's 30 plays?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the storyline of the game. How aggressive are we going to be?
Yep. Well, I think we can now break into what do we anticipate on offense, what do we anticipate on defense, and what we're kind of looking for from a schematic standpoint. From an offensive perspective, I think my question mark going into the game, especially with after reviewing the depth chart, right tackle is a big question mark. Dunker's going to be playing his first game out there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have another tackle body on the team. I know Parker's been coming back from injury, but you don't have another tackle body. So it might just be that's the guy we have, that's the guy we're playing.
Right.
And that's a pretty precarious spot when that's your right tackle.
Yeah.
So is that going to, eventually dictate how passive we are? Are we going to see some game where we're going to come out and run our basic stuff and not even really look to throw it deep because we don't know about a right tackle?
Right. And I think that's definitely the biggest question mark of the game. I think, at least on the offensive side of the ball, is how does the offensive line perform? Because you need to be able to run your bread and butter against a team like this. Like, they're not, coming in with a top 50, 30 defense in the country. We need to see outside zone established, where it comes back to the 2020 type of outside zone, where that is the play we can consistently run, and we know we can get 6 yards and maybe bust it for 12. And that's what I'm looking for the most is, does the offensive line have cohesiveness when it moves and when it takes a step together? You don't see run-throughs. You don't see guys getting beat. And I think I'm really interested. It was the depth chart for offenses. It's pretty straightforward what's happening. There's 3 established positions, Colby, Jones, and Richmond. And then there's 2 open competitions with Feth and Parker sitting behind DeYoung and Dunker. And I think that's going to be an ongoing competition for those spots. I think you're going to see left guard and right tackle rotate consistently. And I think the other 3 spots are going to play probably almost every snap until the 4th.
Yeah, probably see 7 guys then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think another, with Cade's injury, he missed 2 weeks of camp. And you go back and watch Cade's 2021 film at Michigan. I watched it last night. 99% of the snaps are out of shotgun. So what is Iowa going to do, this year? Are we going to play to our players' strength? Cade's strength is playing out of shotgun. He did it all through high school. He did it all through Michigan. He's not used to going under center. And under center, it's not the standard quarterback, movement. Dropping a 5-step drop out of under center is a difficult thing to do. I don't anticipate him, if we have to boot him out under center or get him on the run. He throws very well on the run, but if we're in a 2-receiver set, we ask him to do a 5-step drop back and throw a 10-yard out. That's not playing to what he's been doing his entire life.
Yeah.
So I really want to see how we play formation-wise. Why not go shotgun all game? Play out of your comfort zone as a play caller
to match the skill of your QB.
To match the skill of your QB. So I think that's a very interesting storyline for me.
Well, just from what we heard from Brian, talk about schematic changes. Graham, we did see an updated system with Labus in the bowl game where they had their 6 canned plays. And once they ran those, they pretty much went back to basic stuff.
Yeah, luckily we got a lead early.
So I think we're still just going to see the same concept. I think that's what Kirk believes that he can run.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going away.
Yeah. It's always the thought of I can teach it, so we should run it.
I think on the positive side, what we're looking for, and this could be a marker for a pretty fantastic season if you have skill players making plays within the system.
Yeah.
That's if you can run outside zone boot, even your typical 3-step drop fly and execute it. Just push the basic buttons.
Right.
And then everything else can develop off that. But that's really what Iowa's lacked is a jab. Yeah. For 2 years, they've lacked a jab.
And it's, like you said, a jab is so important for an offense. It's the critical piece of every fake you make forever. If you can have that jab consistently, it sets up play action. It sets up your boot. It, causes defenses to get frustrated. It causes them to be more aggressive than they should be. And Iowa needs to regain its jab. That's what you want to see in week 1, game 1.
Yeah. I think we move on to defense now.
Well, I think I have a few more points on offense. Okay. I want to discuss. I want to see how they react to Cade. Is it a 1 safety high look? Is it a 2 safety high look? What is that aspect going to be?
Well, they're going to be. I mean, if we're in 2 tight ends, it's going to be rolled down the whole game.
Right.
I think every team that we play, granted, from what I've watched, Utah State does play a fair amount of shell. They're playing off coverage a lot, and they're trying to prevent the big play.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to come into Iowa's building and say, why play pass for that moment? You're playing an offense that hasn't been successful for 2 years. Really, your only way to stay in this game is by being an aggressive defense.
Right.
So you're probably going to see them come out and run some press man out wide.
Prove it.
Come off the edge hard.
Right.
Prove it before we're going to make any changes for you.
And we're going to that'd be a great sign if we can.
Yeah.
If you can get some one-on-one matches with Anderson, even I bet Reganey can make these guys look, pretty silly in some situations. And I'm a little concerned just about procedures as a whole. Like, once again, you have Cade. He didn't run live in spring. He snapped the ball on a clap at Michigan. What's his cadence like? Yeah. That you kind of forget, like when you only have 2 weeks of live practice, all the little details of football come out in week 1. We saw it last year with this just Logan Jones snaps. Like those things just floated back. And with kind of the influx of transfers and Cade not having a lot of time, like, are we going to see false starts? Are we going to see, him maybe like fumbling a snap once in a while? I think that's like all the small stuff. I feel like game 1 that he hasn't had the time to rep through.
I think that,
and if he doesn't,
I think that's a little bit of nerves though. You might be like Petrus walked into last year, probably the most nervous guy in the whole building. Right. Is Cade going to be as nervous for that game? Right. That's executing, some pretty basic stuff. I understand, it's practice. Like you need those reps. Yeah. But I think those were more attributed to nerves than anything. Yeah. And you had Jones, delayed on snaps because his brain was short circuiting because he's playing D1 football center for the first time. Right.
And I think the one position I'm actually looking forward to the most is Caleb Brown. I think he's going to take the Tyrone Tracy role. I think.
Can actually be good at it.
Right. Yeah. And just have that ability to make one more play. Yeah. Or one guy miss and actually turn something like, I think jet sweeps, bubble screens.
It's going to be interesting when
reverses.
How we use them again, though, because I've seen we just telegraph those plays. We don't do a good job of like springing on you. Like when you see a jet sweep coming, it's like there's really no surprise to it. It's going the wide side of the field. It's out of our base A set. Yeah, you're going to likely see the couple of those this week just to see if we can do it. But that's like kind of been the crux of Brian Ferentz's offensive coordinator tenure. Is he has his base offense he learned in 2004. He can call to that pretty well. He's got the bubble jailbreak screen where Laporta goes up the middle of the field. He's got some good calls off that. Yeah, he can use tight ends well. But when we've tried to implement like things that have hurt us on the opposite side of the field, like the jet sweep action, even like our read option games, it just doesn't look natural because it wasn't this holistic idea behind the offense. Right. Those are very much like piecemeal additions that
you're kind of like
falling on their face.
Kind of copy and pasting onto the scheme as a whole.
And that doesn't all look the same. Everything like when you break out those schemes, there's some like you could see it right away, like something's up.
But I still think like if you have an outside zone game, I think they do come more natural. Like I think that's maybe why we've seen kind of an unnatural aspect of the offense is because teams can call BS on our jab. And
I think a guy under center who's athletic enough to have boot action where you can't just tee him up. Right. Like that's where it'll be different.
Yeah. It'll cause them problems. Yeah. And I think the last offensive thing I want to talk about is how we're going to handle running back snaps in the first 4 games. I think first 3 games, just non-conference.
Caleb will get the start and then it'll probably be, I don't know. I think you give LaShawn 45 carries this non-con. Yeah. You don't want to run Caleb into the ground. Yeah. LaShawn's a workhorse. Yeah. He's like earned the carries too. He's
right. Kirk's kind of hyping him up right now. He's kind of taking that like senior aspect to the role in the position group. And you definitely want to save him. Like you want to have Caleb for Penn State and the entire Big Ten season. I can already kind of see the storylines being built out though from like general writers where they're like Caleb Johnson deserves, 25 carries a game. How is LaShawn splitting carries with them? But I'm guessing when you see us play, the premier opponents, the ones who really need Caleb, he's going to get 20 touches. Yeah. Like you're going to want to save his legs for those games. And
you're going to need him for like 4 or 5 games this year. Right. Other than that, don't overuse him.
Yep. 100%. So it's time to move on to defense. I think the clear question mark here is middle linebacker. I think it's just probably the biggest glaring hole on the entire.
I think you could also add corner to that too. It's not glaring, but like it's not difficult to think about a world where maybe you have an injury there. You have, they've been rumors of suspensions at corner.
Right.
Any injury or extracurricular thing that happens there, you're playing 2 redshirt freshmen.
Right.
And those are like the 2 things going in the season. And we've mentioned this ad nauseum, but corner injuries happen all the time.
Yeah.
And if we're going to make it through a whole season, between Deshaun Lee and TJ Hall, someone's going to be playing probably 3 or 4 games this season.
Thing is, I like a lot, both of them.
I like them a lot.
So,
yeah.
like, I know what you're saying. Like, you don't want to be playing a redshirt freshman like for an entire season at starting corner, especially in Iowa's system. It's probably the most important position we have.
Yeah.
Just because you're legitimately on an island.
When you look at like the success of teams, it's almost always predicated on how good our corners are. I mean, the obvious one is D-line, but
even
the dominant ones have the great corners.
Right. And you have that this year.
Yeah.
You have Cooper, and then he can just dictate how we play every single play.
Yeah. Especially in zone.
But I think when you look through the entire, like the depth chart, like clearly defensive line has the only guy who can play that's not a redshirt sophomore in the 8-man 2 deep. You're not including some guys that are very good players.
Yeah, like Brian Allen.
Right. We saw in the kids practice look
and Taylor
amazing.
Thompson's not in there either.
So you're only playing one guy, and it's Graves, who we can, compared to the Bosa brothers.
Yeah.
I feel very good about the defensive line. I feel very good about the starting secondary. But when you replace Jack Campbell with Higgins, I think Higgins is the step I want to see him take is like when he gets in space with guys, it looks good. He makes plays. He had a really good play against McCarthy, against Michigan. He's shown excellent strength against Purdue, like bench pressing the guard before.
Yeah. I think he was anointed a little early too.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
But I want to see him have the anticipation play.
Yeah.
Because Campbell obviously is bigger and longer than them and a little bit faster. Like if you're going to take a step back from that, you better be kind of having that film study and anticipation quick thought where you are guessing where the offense is going. You're not reacting. I think where we saw, how many linebackers for the last decade that have struggled to take on the linebacker role at Iowa is that they watch the ball and they react post the play happening, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see Higgins start leaning. I want to start seeing him like guessing plays. And that's truly what I want to see in week 1 is him, make a play with it's a 0-yard rush because he shot through, he trusted his eyes, and he played fast.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that from him in a very small sample size. And he's playing weak most of the time. It's not really that role for that weak player to play fast.
Well, you're talking. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but it's another guy that's coming in as a backup.
Right.
As a backup, you're really just trying to keep the bandage on.
Yeah.
You're not trying to make the play.
Yeah.
You especially when you have other guys on the team last year, where I got Van Ness, Moss, DeJean, and Campbell next to me. Why am I trying to play outside my comfort zone?
Yeah.
No linebacker allows for more of that kind of like free-flowing play too.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to allow you to even maybe be a half step late to react to something, but then just as long as you're playing fast and physical, it's going to work out.
Yeah, and I think I just want to see that step. I think that's like my biggest question mark on defense, and my truly like only concern I have is how does that play? Are we going to look more like 2018 under Welch and other linebackers where
you mix in the DB room. That's what 2018. Yeah, it's okay. We have a new set of linebackers. And they played maybe a little slow to start the season, but the DB room was This DB room is uncomparable. Yeah, you have so many talented players, and they're all experienced.
It's the strength of truly the strength of your team.
Yeah,
like now with Shannon being out, like if we had to re-rank our position group skins, you put DB. You just look at that starting lineup, you're like, damn, that's a lot of very good players. Yeah. It's not. I don't sense like any of those guys. You be putting them against
3 NFLers and 2 seniors.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And guys who played very well as seniors too. They're not like we're giving them a nod. They're like they've made plays themselves.
Yeah. Schulte and Castro both been fantastic.
Right. And I think the defense is just going to be an interesting.
I think on the when I was kind of trying to figure out how this game was going to play out, your original thought is, man, if our D line dominates early. Mm-hmm. They're going to be just perpetual 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 with a QB that, he's a gunslinger. He just throws the ball.
Right.
So, I think if we're going to see, and it's going to be this spread power we've seen every team run. Mm-hmm. We're likely not going to roll to their QB read right away, so you're going to see QBs come off the edge, probably clean a couple times. We're
get
going to allow
4 yards with ease.
We're going to allow them to hold on to the ball, and maybe we're comfortable with them being in 3rd and 2 a lot too.
Yeah,
okay,
make the play.
Now make the play. You either have to, we're going to call your bullshit. We're going to line up a little more aggressive.
Right.
So it's just going to be a really interesting game to see where the defense is at, because if they can pull out, what we've seen from the past 2 years, where it's this, very well cohesive unit. Even if you get a couple first downs, they don't overreact. They just play their ball. And then you can, again, it's all about pairing. Like on the other end, we need to have some kind of pairing. We need to have at least a offense that can hold on to the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I look at the entire scope of the year. I do anticipate the defense to take a slight step back.
Yeah.
I think you lost a lot of very good front 7 players. You lost Van Ness, you lost Campbell. Now you lose Shannon.
Benson too.
Benson, Wagner. Wagner's probably, he's probably replaced by the depth of Llewellyn and Herkett. Yeah. But it's a lot. I mean, you lose Campbell. It's like generally when Iowa loses a generational talent at some position, Linderbaum, Wirfs, name it like Hawkinson, Font, it's usually a hole behind it. It's interesting now the transfer portal is like, it's basically, a new Iowa where you bring in Nick Jackson. Are you going to have that same type of hole that we've had in the past? And I'm excited to see how Nick Jackson plays.
I think you could say, okay, we take a step back at middle linebacker, but we might have got ahead better at weak.
Right. Yeah.
It's a
very real possibility.
Watch how Iowa's been attacked for the past, 3 seasons with Benson at weak or 2 seasons with Benson at weak. They have attacked him a ton, but it's like if now that's not a weakness, it's it will be interesting to see how Higgins plays in pass coverage. Because if he plays that well, again, I think there's a reason he's been getting on the field, even with a very stacked linebacker room. I don't think this is a scenario where we're playing some guy we don't want to play.
Right.
I think we're like, oh, finally he gets his look.
Yeah. I mean, going back to even our previous videos, I drafted Higgins 5th.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a good year.
Yeah,
but I think when
you're trying to find a problem at your fifth year senior linebacker,
exactly. Yeah, it's a good sign. Yeah. But truly, I can't find other issues on the defense that I'm what if Cooper sucks? It's no, that's not going to happen. Jamari's we established, and it's I'm having a hard time.
Established.
Right, the defense line's so old. Yeah. Logan Lee, Evans, Craig, Herkett, it's just he truly is the biggest question mark, and it's not anything about what we've seen him do or what our anticipation of what he will do.
Yeah,
it's just the reality that you're replacing a first-round middle linebacker.
Yeah, you might be the 10th best guy in this defense,
right?
But that could still be NFL.
Right, exactly, which is insane to say.
Yeah. All right, should we move into our picks for the?
Let's final prediction for the game. And
let's do it. So this is going to feed into one of my picks because I just. What you guys will find out throughout the season, I love betting college football unders. It's probably some Schadenfreude stuff from being within the Big Ten West for the past 10 years. But I've watched a lot of gross football, and I think picking unders is a very easy thing to do in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. I want to say I've had extreme success, but 60%.
It's definitely naturally where your brain goes.
It's my comfort zone. I live in the slop. But I think that how this game is going to play out is we're going to see Iowa come out and be a little herky-jerky on offense. We're not going to see cohesiveness. Mm-hmm. You go back to the Cade injury. You go back to, they're bringing in a lot of new pieces on offense. How are you going to get Caleb Brown the ball? How are you going to use Eric All? Is he going to block well enough? Mm-hmm. And I think also just the insecurity that, hey, maybe we fucked this game up and all of a sudden you're too aggressive from the start and you throw a pick and your offense isn't what you think it is.
Right.
So I think we're going to want to see the basic stuff to start.
Yeah.
And if you're going to see the basic stuff, that means Utah State's going to know the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. And that might lead us to being into a 14-3, 10-3 game and a half. And my guess is we end up somewhere around 31-6, 31-9.
Yep.
And Ferentz will call the dogs off, hopefully, for the sake of the under. We don't give up the second team defense touchdown.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to end up somewhere around there. Maybe a little comfortable. But yeah, I think somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think it's still going to play out like a general Iowa first game, especially the first half. It's going to we're going to be very basic and try not to lose, the first game. Mm-hmm. A lot of long-term head coaches, they say you don't try to win the first game. All you do is try not to lose it. Mm-hmm. And Kirk definitely has that mantra.
Yes.
Just don't F it up. I see it 31-10. I think this Iowa team is just going to be a tad more explosive at points. I think you truly can get to the ball to a lot of guys that can make a guy miss and actually score. Like you list off like Caleb Johnson, Caleb Brown, Lachey, Eric All, Seth Anderson. I feel like all those guys like could make a play. And then obviously put K at the top of that where he's playing point guard to all those guys. Generally in this situation, playing a Mountain West opponent that's going to be decent, probably 24 points, and we win 24-6. I think just with the amount of skill, talent, and the kind of bump, and as like the offense line bump I'm anticipating too, I think 31-10 is where I'm going to end up at.
Okay.
And that's a late score.
Yeah.
That's a maybe 31-13 or something like that.
Yeah.
31-10 where we got our backups in with 8 minutes left, 6 minutes left. We're running cover 4 every single play, and they walk down the field versus freshmen.
Yeah.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
You want to go into your bets now?
Yeah, sure. So going off that
your picks?
Yeah, my picks, yes. Going off that same vein about living in the slop, Northwestern Rutgers, they play on a Sunday at 11 a.m. Probably the sleepiest game you can imagine. I don't know if anyone will be in the stands. The over-under, I think, is at 40.5 right now.
Yeah.
Rutgers scored, so the spread is 6.5 Rutgers. So what Vegas is saying is going to be a 23-17 game.
Yeah.
Rutgers has scored over 23 points in the last 2 seasons, I bet 3 times.
Yeah.
Northwestern scored over 17 points maybe 3 times last year against horrific defenses. And Rutgers is not throwing out a bad defense as odd as it sounds.
Yeah.
So then what the thought is you have now Rutgers' offense with one skill player I recognize, Johnny Langan, tight end, not explosive, can get open in a D1 game.
Yeah.
With an unproven quarterback, I believe he likes to run the ball too, so you're probably going to see a lot of QB run. That's going to be sucking up time.
Yep.
Northwestern they're not great on offense. I mean, on defense. They kind of have they had a horrific defense last year. But is Rutgers going to be able to execute enough in a slow, muck-it-up game where Northwestern's going to line up in cover 4 and say, okay, beat us on 12-play drives? Are they going to do that 4 times?
Yep.
That's what you're betting.
Yep. And I'm joining the bet with you.
Yeah.
I'm going under in that game. And only thing I would bring up is Northwestern is basically essentially kind of an Iowa defense where they're going to be in 4-3 cover 4 consistently. They play the most zone other than Iowa in the entire country.
Yep.
They build their defensive linemen gigantic. I think they even build them bigger than we do.
Yeah.
Their DNs are like 290.
Yep.
Kirk Soraka, the old Minnesota OC, is now at Rutgers. Minnesota ran the ball the 4th most in the country, only behind the service academies in Army, Navy, and Air Force. So they're going to pound the rock. And it's also an RPO system, and Northwestern runs a bunch of zone. So RPO generally is trying to take advantage of man-to-man, where you're having these linebackers shoot up really quickly. You're in these one-on-one situations.
High safety looks.
So Northwestern is, even though they're bad defensively, they're built to stop this system. At least slow it down to make it like a 12-play drive.
Yeah.
And Rutgers is going to feel very comfortable running the ball 14 straight times.
Yeah.
And probably running their QB and pounding him and just eating up a lot of clock. And the 11 a.m. aspect, I totally forgot about that. It's going to be on a Sunday, single game. You already can see the tweets about how gross this game is and how can this be a headliner game.
Well, I think both coaches are just going to come into it like, as you just said, don't lose this game by throwing the ball.
Right.
Like, if we're throwing, it's outside the numbers.
We don't have the skill to
don't have the skill to score. Like, even if you get a ball to a receiver, is he going to house it? No.
Right.
Like, I think it's just one of those games where both teams going to be very comfortable playing in the slop.
Yeah.
And with the new clock changes, you might see some quick halves.
Yeah.
Even with the touchdown drives, I think those will be some long touchdown drives.
Even Shiano during the BTN interview, he made sure to bring up like, oh, we brought a good punter in.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, they were sad about losing their amazing punter, which he was amazing. Like, he went blow to blow against Torrey a few years back. But he's like, yeah, we brought in a good punter. Like, that's his mindset. Like, he's like, special teams and defense are like how we play. Yeah.
So then outside that, I'll do the under 45 in Iowa. I already laid out that one. I think that's a good bet, just because I don't think we're going to see a cohesive team. We're going to see a bit disjointed, and that's just kind of Iowa early season.
Yeah.
And then with a really good defensive line and secondary, I think the only way that gets broken up is a couple pick sixes, maybe a couple picks on their end, which could happen. But I still like that pick.
Yeah.
And then my final one is a conditional one. It's Nebraska, Minnesota. So it's gonna be that Thursday night game, one of the first big games of the season. It's sitting at 7.5 right now.
It's at 7 now.
Is it 7?
Yeah.
If it gets down, I like 7. 6.5 would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I think people are. I mean, big red money is going to come in.
Yeah.
Nebraska fans are to come out and bet Nebraska hard. It's probably going to come down a little farther. But you're just looking at a complete, cohesive Minnesota team.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in enough skilled transfers on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
They're going to have success. They're likely going to run the ball at will.
Yeah.
They're going to have success in the passing game. They have a QB who knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He can beat you with his legs too. Nebraska, I think, could have a flash in the pan moments on offense. You might see
first half success where you're kind of running the ball well. You're figuring out your squad, but you have enough talent to move the ball.
But you're one play away from giving the ball back to Minnesota and not having going 12 plays and sucking the life out of the game.
And then a second half adjustment where you don't have that second punch.
Yeah. Well, you're just trying to teach. Like Minnesota's got to teach these guys for 3 years. Yeah. They know every iteration. Like, okay, Nebraska might have a good counter punch right away, but they're not going to be able to go counter.
They don't have the fifth, sixth deviation.
Yeah. And that's all Minnesota does is they're small deviations from their norm.
Right.
And if you have a complete unit and you add in Tyler Newman, you add in Lindenberg, you add in Wale, it's like their defense has got some players on it.
Definitely.
And I think the story is that Minnesota's offense is going to score at will.
Yeah.
So between those 3 picks, I think right now I'll even say -7. That's a good one.
Right.
3 picks out there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think -7. You got push insurance.
Yeah.
Like, ride it.
Yeah.
I would not be joining just because the Big Red contingent that was about to swarm Minneapolis and swarm our town is going to be large.
Yeah.
That's my only concern.
I didn't think about that.
That was my only thought. I'm like, oh, wait, it's probably going to be 50-50.
Yeah.
Because like rules first game.
Yeah.
I'm going to go I'm going to go Florida +6.5. I watched this entire game last year. I was on Utah. I lost a bet. And then Cam Rising towards ACL in the Rose Bowl. That was less than 9 months ago. And his entire skill set is essentially running the ball and like being on the move and throwing the ball. Florida did not get tackled by them all last year. It was every skill position player that touched the ball made a guy miss, and then it was gang tackling to get him down. I think a second year in Billy Napier's system. I really like Billy Napier as a coach. If you don't remember, this is the guy who was at Louisiana and beat Iowa State in 2021 when they were coming off their dream season with Purdy and a bunch of guys that they expected to be really good. Actually, 2019, and they beat him 2020.
Yeah.
But I really respect him as a coach. I think now in year 2, they brought in a top 12 recruiting class, brought in a bunch of good transfers. Rising is a big question mark, but this line opened at 10 and went down to 4. That's a very good sign that somebody knew something about his health. He wasn't full speed even a week and a half ago. So I have a hard time believing that he's going to play. Kithy is another stud that they had last year that kind of broke the game open at points. He tore his ACL last year. He was at full speed in camp. A lot of injury questions. Even if both those guys play, I still feel decent about Florida. I am betting on Graham Mertz on the road. That's how I end it.
Yeah.
If like next week I lose this bet, just play that line. You bet on Graham Mertz on the road.
Yeah.
Like, you idiot.
You're going to watch him hold the ball in the pocket for 5 seconds.
Right.
Down 7. You're like,
yeah.
What is he doing?
So hope to God they hand the ball 40 times.
Yeah. Well, I think
Florida
I think you'll be if Mertz plays ball out offense, I think you'll be very happy with that bet. Because I think, again, it's just going to be a lot of talent on talent.
Yeah.
Utah plays a little bit of catch on defense.
Right, they do.
Are you going to play catch against the best athletes in the planet?
Right. And if it's a backup QB, I feel very good because that line's going to drop down to 3.5, 4.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.5.
Yeah.
And then my last bet, so I'm on Rutgers under with him. I'm going to watch that slop fest on Sunday. And my last bet is the Illini -9.5. And I've researched this for way too long. And I almost took it off my board so many times.
You did take it off your board.
I did take it off my board in a text message group. But, Toledo is a MAC champion. They returned 16 starters. They all have this, momentum behind them. They're possibly the first, MAC team to go undefeated and, since Jordan Lynch 2009.
They're ranked in the U.S. Coaches Bowl.
What?
Yeah. And I think that goes in your favor.
It does. And so the 2 question marks why this line's 9.5 and why it's, it's a smaller line than it should be when you have a MAC opponent versus a Big Ten opponent is because Illinois is returning, none of their secondary. And they have a huge question mark at QB. And then you bring in this MAC team that can play well. I'm not concerned about Toledo throwing the ball in that game. Like, that was a good portion of their offense, but they're not going to have the athletes to beat them consistently in the back end. And I think Illinois is going to be able to run the ball at will. Toledo was horrible at defending the run certain games last year. If you had any sort of caliber and athlete in the backfield, they did not tackle well. They got carved up against Ball State. I think this is one of those lines where it should be 13.5 in my mind, and it's 9.5 because there are question marks for the Illini. But those question marks don't matter for my like how I'm thinking about the game. All right, we're going to hand the ball off 40 times to Reggie Love and the stable backs we have. And then on defense, I'm not concerned about them throwing the ball around. It's not their strength. They threw for over 300 yards like 3 times last year.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to ride that. But, man, I dug deep on Toledo, and I just kept on finding bad things. So if I lose
I think, again, if we're working on, what are trap lines?
Right.
The more information you find about how you're making a dumb bet, the better.
Right.
Because that's all the public's reading. They're going, man, Toledo's
got
game.
Yeah, exactly.
You're giving them 9.5 to a team that can't score points?
Yeah. And so, obviously, we're giving out picks. If you take these picks and you lose, if we go negative, we're going to have punishments for ourselves. So, rather than just only having a positive, if we make you money or, we have you have these picks and we help you out, if we lose, if we go 1-2, if we go 0-3, we're going to have punishments that we have to endure going forward, as well as an entire season of winning percentage. So whoever finishes higher at the end of the year with the winning percentage gets to dictate what the other one has to do at the end of the year. So we get to select the other one's punishment. So in the YouTube comments for this video, we'll have a portion where you can comment, what punishment should we have to endure if we have a losing week? And we'll take any entries. We might decline a few of them, depending on what they are.
We will decline most.
So find that middle ground where we're not going to be too scared to do it. Yeah. But it's kind of a fun way to, incorporate picks that could be.
What are the chips called we bought?
Oh, it's like the spiciest chip in the world.
So we purchased those prior to actually like witnessing what it does to people.
Yeah.
So we think that's going to be probably a season end one. Maybe if you have a significantly
if you go
like 5
game
losing streak, 3 game losing streak, maybe you will have to do that. But probably going to build up to that one because it sounds like I was like sitting at home. I was like, if I have to have that next week, I'm going to be in real trouble.
I have to go to work in the morning. I might be out of commission for like 12 hours.
Exactly.
So. Yeah.
Well, again, we love all the support. It's been a great start. Key thing we want to mention at this point is we've had a lot more viewership and returning viewers than our subscriber base. So if you guys could do us a favor and go out and subscribe to the channel. Also, there are donation aspects that are now newly added to the channel because of our recent partnership with YouTube. Yep. So if you feel the need to donate to the channel, we really appreciate it. Even if you don't, we're going to keep on doing it, so no problem there. But thank you so much, and hopefully we have a good game one.
Yep. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.